I continue my series of championship battles, and today I want to present to you a duel between the 9th world champion, Tigran Petrosian, and the 11th, Robert Fischer. We'll talk about a game that took place in 1959, during the Candidates Tournament. The young Bobby controlled the white pieces and began the fight by pushing his king's pawn forward. Tigran Petrosian replied with his trademark solid defense, the Karo Khan. White chose the two knights system, meeting the counterblow in the center and developing the second knight to f3. Tigran brought out his bishop beyond the pawn chain, pinned the knight, and was ready to close the door behind the bishop. White forced the opposing piece to decide its fate, and here Black exchanged on f3, giving the opponent the bishop pair, but at the same time obtaining a solid pawn structure with no weaknesses. Petrosian increased the pressure on the central pawn. Fischer reinforced it with d3. Black opened the diagonal for his bishop, and White decided to switch to a King's Indian type setup by playing g3. The bishop soon developed to g2, and White began to play in the spirit of the King's Indian, aiming to attack on the king side. Petrosian pinned the knight again, threatening the central thrust d4. White defended against the pin, but Black nevertheless played d4, seizing space in the center. After the retreat of the knight, Tigran Vartanovich exchanged minor pieces on d2. We all know that Robert Fischer loved to play the King's Indian defense against d4, but at the same time Tigran Petrosian loved to play against the King's Indian, obtaining exactly this kind of pawn structure in the center, and, whenever possible, organizing a queenside pawn advance with c5 and then c4. Before we jump to the next move, I want to show you something that's actually made a big difference in how I study openings. It's called Lotus Chess. This app literally studies your own games and builds personalized lessons around the openings you face the most. Let's say you keep getting crushed in the Sicilian or the London openings. Lotus Chess spots that instantly and shows you how to crush those lines step by step. The design is super clean, everything feels smooth, and it actually makes studying openings fun. You start seeing real improvement fast. You can try it for free. The first 50 positions of every opening are available to everyone. So if you want to finally dominate your openings and surprise your opponents, check out Lotus Chess. Download it right now from the App Store or Google Play. The link's down below. Big thanks to Lotus Chess for sponsoring today's video. And now, let's get back to the game. So, White completes the fianchetto setup, and Black responds with c5. Fischer evacuates his king from the center, connecting his rooks. Black now urgently needs to eliminate his lag in development. Fischer opens the path for his f-pawn, aiming to strike at the base of Black's pawn chain, the pawn on e5, and to launch an attack on the king side. Here, Tigran Petrosian makes a critical strategic decision. He plays b5, so that after f4 and mass exchanges, he will gain an excellent outpost for his knight on e5. A much more reliable plan would have been simply to castle short, and after f4 to begin the classical counterplay on the queen side. The position would have remained sharp, with mutual chances for both sides. But after the advance g5, Fischer needed to respond immediately with f4, trying to use his significant lead in development and the unsafe position of the opposing monarch. Although, even after f4 and the capture, Black could strengthen the center with the queen and, against a knight jump, simply castle short, and the engine says Black would have been completely fine. In the actual game, however, Fischer decided to attack the pawn on g5 directly. Petrosian defends it by pushing a6. At this moment, White should have challenged the queen side with the move c3, so that even if Black castled long, his king wouldn't feel entirely comfortable on that side of the board. Instead, Bobby plays a4, intensifying the pressure on the pawn at g5. Now it would be disadvantageous for Black to play g4, since the knight could retreat while attacking the pawn on g4. And if Black tries the defensive move h5, White would open the king side with f3. So Petrosian is forced to defend the g5 pawn with his rook. White plays a3. Sooner or later, Black will castle long, and then White will be ready to undermine the pawn chain either with b4 or c3. So Tigran Petrosian plays queen e7, preparing to castle. White trades on g5, attacks the pawn, and black defends it with his queen. Then comes the long-awaited pawn break, c3, challenging the entire chain. Petrosian castles long, as expected. White captures on d4 to open the c-file, and Petrosian, calm as ever, recaptures with the e-pawn, as if nothing happened. In doing so, the future 9th world champion shows that he's playing for a win, wanting to exploit the awkward position of White's light-squared bishop, which now bites into its own pawn. His plan: occupy the e5 square with the knight, exchange one pair of knights if possible, and gradually consolidate. On the other hand, White has dangerous initiative on the queen side, as he's quickly opening lines in that sector of the board. Black moves his king to the side, and White plays rook c1. According to the engine's recommendation, Black first should have played g4, pushing the knight to the edge of the board and then trying to trade queens. Only after that would it have made sense to occupy the central square e5. But the move chosen in the game, knight e5, gave White a chance to develop dangerous initiative on the queen side. Fischer captures on e5 and then plays rook c4, preparing to double the rooks. White protects his pawn, Black doubles his own rooks, and in this position, Petrosian plays g4, sealing off the light-squared bishop completely. Fischer transfers his queen to the b-file, threatening to strike on c5, pressuring the pawn on b7, and at the same time targeting the pawn sitting on d4. Petrosian is forced to indirectly defend the central pawn with his rook. Here, a simple exchange on c5 would have given White a clear advantage. Black would have to recapture with the knight, and though the pawn on d4 would be protected, White could defend his own pawn with the queen, attack g4, and keep up the pressure on the queen side. Instead, the future 11th world champion begins to make one mistake after another. He plays a4, allowing a tactical shot, queen e7. With this move, Black clears the e5 square for his knight, threatening to jump forward with an attack not only on the rook, but also on the pawn at d3, while simultaneously creating two hits against the pawn on b4 in case the rook retreats. White faces serious problems here, but there was still one acceptable option: a sacrifice of exchange. He needed to take on c5, and after the knight jump, capture the pawn on d4. Yes, Black would then deliver a knight fork, and after taking on d3 gain an extra exchange, but White would have strong compensation in the form of a continuing attack against the exposed enemy king. He could follow up with c6, bishop a6, and so on. However, in the actual game, the young American makes a fatal mistake. He transfers his rook to b1, aiming at the b7 square. Black attacks the rook, and after the exchange of heavy pieces on c5, the pawn on b7 remains doubly protected. So Petrosian confidently captures on d3, attacking the white queen. After the retreat, he also takes the pawn on c5. Fischer decides to start a trading operation. He captures the pawn on g4, but at the cost of the pawn on a4. Black now obtains two connected passed pawns, plus an additional passer along the d-file, and the position becomes technically won. Let's now watch the conversion technique from Tigran himself. White plays e5, finally opening the diagonal for his light-squared bishop, but it's already too late. Black responds with knight c5, defending against the hit on b7. White brings his queen to f3, but the black pawn continues to advance. The powerful passed pawn on the d-file completely restricts White's forces, especially the rook. After d2, White must now defend against the promotion threat. Fischer plays bishop f3, but Black creates another idea: the knight jump to c3, followed by the pawn's promotion. So White has to deal with this new tactical danger. The combination rook b7 doesn't help here, because Black simply captures on b7 and promotes the pawn next move. Fischer tries queen e4, renewing the attack on b7, but Petrosian calmly defends, bringing the knight back to c5, protecting the pawn, and at the same time attacking the queen. After the retreat, he begins pushing his queenside pawns forward. White has no active plan left. He can only stand and wait. Black improves the position of his pieces, then renews the attack on the queen. Queen f4, and Petrosian again renews the promotion threat. Fischer defends with queen c4. White can capture on c5 with check. Petrosian defends with b6, slightly exposing his king. But that's the price of progress. After all, How else can you win? The pawns must advance together, and the king will soon join them. White plays rook d1, firmly blocking the passed pawn on the d-file. Black pushes the a-pawn forward, and now the white queen tries to counterattack on the king side. After rook d4, Fischer plays queen h6, hoping to sneak onto f7 or somehow disturb the black king from a8. Since black can't exchange queens, the tension remains until the very end. Petrosian continues with b5. Of course, queen f8 was possible here, but black has a simple defensive resource, queen c7. After that, if white checks, the king calmly steps to b8. The checks are over, and the black pawns keep marching forward. So, the future 11th world champion in this game plays queen e3. The black king boldly moves forward after a check from h6. Petrosian interposes with the knight. The queen returns to e3, and the king frees himself from the pin. White can't create any serious threats. His rook is passive, completely paralyzed by the black passed pawn. Petrosian keeps pushing his pawns on the queen side. After queen e3, the black king moves to b6. On the pinning move queen e3, he once again blocks with the knight. After bishop f3, black plays b4. From all of white's small attempts and checks, black easily defends. On queen h8, Petrosian offers a queen trade. Fischer, of course, refuses, counterattacking the pawn instead. Black defends with queen d7, and after queen h8, he plays b3, fearing no checks at all, because after a check from b8, the king steps to a5, and after a check from a8, he goes to b5. There's an important nuance here. If the king went to b4, white could deliver a double attack, targeting the pawn on a4, capture it, and the fight would sharpen again. So Petrosian makes the strong move king b5. After the next check, the king walks to c4, ready to hide behind his own advancing pawns. What a fantastic journey by the commander of the black army. Fischer attacks the pawn, Petrosian defends it with his knight. After bishop f3, he pushes a3, and the king shelters on b2. Credit must be given to the young American. He fought until the very end. Petrosian blocks the e-pawn, protects his rook, and after queen a8, plays a2. On queen a5, he again offers a queen exchange. White captures on d2, but after king a3, white resigns, because either the black pawn will promote immediately, or, after the exchange on a4, black pushes b2, a1, gets a new queen, and easily wins. What a fantastic safari by the black king, performed by the 9th world champion, Tigran Petrosian. If you enjoyed this game, don't forget to support the video with a like, a repost, and a ring of the bell, because chess is awesome.